discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're 3 years on from a monumental party in Parliament Square as we finally left the European Union. But have we made the most of it? We'll discuss that this evening. We'll have a look at how a government department literally spied on people who questioned lockdown. And our friends at the IMF are saying we're in for a real shocker of a year. They've never been great friends of ours. We'll discuss whether they're right or not. And joining me on Talking Pints, an artist, Paul McGowan, who's got quite strong political views himself. Should all be fun. Join me in a minute after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. Tens of thousands of teachers in England and Wales have joined the UK's largest education union to take part in national strikes tomorrow. The National Education Union says 40,000 school staff signed up in a fortnight. Tomorrow's the first of 7 days of strikes by the union across February and March in a dispute over pay. The Education Minister, Nick Gibb, described the strikes as disruptive.
It is disappointing that the NEU has decided to go ahead with these strikes when we are still discussing issues of pay and workload and other issues very constructively. Even yesterday we were having those discussions. And strikes are disruptive to children's education, particularly after the 2 years of disruption during the COVID pandemic, and it's disrupting to parents and families as well.
A new report by the International Monetary Fund is predicting a negative outlook for the UK's economy. It's forecasting that the UK's gross domestic product, or GDP, will shrink by 0.6% over the coming year, even though in October they said it would grow by 0.3%. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says Britain, however, outperformed many other financial forecasts last year, despite higher interest rates and tighter government budgets. But the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, though, is blaming the IMF's stance on 13 years of Conservative economic policy.
The UK economy has got huge potential, and yet the government is failing to seize that initiative. And we see today, with these forecasts from the IMF, with the UK now at the bottom of the league table for growth, both this year and next, the government needs to be doing so much more to fulfil the potential of the UK economy.
Lancashire Police say they found a key witness in the search for a missing mother of two. 45-year-old Nicola Bully was last seen walking her dog by the River Wyre on Friday. Her mobile phone was later found on a bench. Her dog was discovered running loose nearby. And today, the Princess of Wales has been saying it's essential to know what's needed to help future generations become happy, healthy adults. Launching her new early years campaign called Shaping Us, the Princess says she hopes to help people understand how important early childhood is and how it affects later life. Kensington Palace says the importance of early years development will be a key focus for Kate for the rest of her life. That's your latest news from the GB Newsroom. You are up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Back now to Farage.
Good evening. Well, 3 years ago tonight, there was the most almighty party that took place in Parliament Square. Boy, it was lively, it was fun, tens of thousands of people, maybe 100,000 people, joyously celebrating not just the fact that we'd left the European Union, but that we had finally beaten a political and media establishment who would simply refuse to accept the result of June the 23rd. This was our modern-day peasants' revolt, and we're going to celebrate it in style. And I was lucky. I did the honours of doing the countdown to that moment. And let me just share that with you now. Well, it was quite a moment, and passions were running very, very high. People were thrilled, people were excited, and whilst we didn't think it would lead to immediate riches, we did think it would lead to a new kind of politics. But maybe a clue as to what was going to happen was going on simultaneously a few hundred yards up the road. In Downing Street, Boris Johnson, and for those of you watching this on television, I can show you the pictures. For those listening on radio, Boris Johnson very modestly just sort of banged a gong and looked, look at his face. There isn't really any joy. He looks almost half embarrassed and somewhat awkward. Oh gosh, we promised the British people we'll do this. We've got an 80-seat majority. Golly, we've actually got to do something now, and that's not easy because many in our own party never wanted it in the first place. And so here we are, 3 years after that moment and 2 years after we left the single market. Have there been achievements? Yes, there have. There's no question that in terms of foreign policy, we stand much taller on the world stage, whether that's the AUKUS deal or whether it's the stance we've taken on Ukraine. And you may agree or disagree with that stance, but we were free to make those big decisions, to take a lead. You could equally argue that we haven't had to bail out Italy and many other countries with this huge coronavirus payment scheme that the European Commission have dreamt up. You could argue we've avoided many EU laws, but the truth of it is, we haven't even removed the 5% VAT on our fuel bills. A simple thing like that would have been a win. And go and ask the 5.5 million men and women running small businesses in this country whether any of the regulations by which they have to live have been relieved. The answer is a big fat no. The fishing industry would say much the same. But the big one, the really big one, millions of people voted Brexit back in 2016 who don't normally vote, because they actually thought it was time to get back control of our borders. Very controversially, I put up a poster which showed a snaking column of young men coming into the European Union. The point was vote Brexit, and that won't happen here, but it's happening. 45,000 people crossed the English Channel last year, and we still have a court in Strasbourg that has a say. So, have we made the most of Brexit? Let me know your thoughts, please. Farage at gbnews.uk, because I really don't think we have. I'm delighted we left. It was the right thing to do. It was a joyous moment 3 years ago, but we haven't done anything like enough. And that's frankly because I don't think the Tory party ever really believed in it. Whether Boris Johnson did is an open question. Well, joining me to discuss all of this, long-time Labour MP, Brexit campaigner, now elevated to the House of Lords, Baroness Hoey, but I'm going to call you Kate if that's all right.
Yeah.
Kate, you were part of that journey. There have been some good things that have happened.
Yes, and, I look back 3 years ago, it's gone very, very quickly. It was a very, very happy night, a very emotional night. I remember feeling quite emotional standing with all those people who'd fought so hard. But there's no doubt, undoubtedly, it has been disappointing how slowly we've managed to change things. Now, of course, there was COVID, but I will only make that as an excuse for about 6 months, 9 months, because after that there was all sorts of legislation going through Parliament. And of course, the crucial one about getting rid of all those EU laws is only just coming to the House of Lords next week, and it will be probably massacred by the Lords. So we've not moved on that. I think, you know, for me, it was very much about, as you said at the beginning, about getting our own governments, whoever they were, however they were, whoever elected them, to be in charge. I think what it's done is expose, really, the kind of fact that there is no real leadership in political parties. You know, all our political parties seem to have crumbled, and that there isn't that excitement and, you know, wanting to do things that we could have done because leaving. And of course, you know, I couldn't not mention the fact that those people in Northern Ireland have been left in the European Union, in the single market.
I mean, effectively,
the union has been split up, and that has been kind of ignored. And that will have repercussions in the future, because the divergence that we all hope will come when we get rid of some of these laws, Northern Ireland will be left behind. And that is just not acceptable, you know, it really isn't acceptable. And, the Conservative, particularly the Conservative and Unionist government, as they call themselves, should be utterly ashamed of what's happened.
There's talk of a deal being on the horizon. Would that be a further sellout in your view?
Oh, absolutely. The way it is at the moment, I understand that they're still really only talking about technical trading stuff, you know, green lanes and I mean, once you introduce green and red lanes, you're then actually accepting that there is a customs border.
Yeah.
So but the crucial thing is the constitutional stuff, you know, Northern Ireland. I mean, can I just give one example of this week where, you know, it's come out again, the fact that, you know, anyone who flies from Belfast to Portugal or anywhere in the EU doesn't get duty free. If you fly from London anywhere in the EU, you get duty free. So I then said, well, you know, to ask the Treasury, well, then can we get, if we're supposedly in the EU still, can we then get duty free to London? Oh, no, because we're still part of the UK. So we've got the worst of both worlds, and it will get worse.
No, I think what happened with Northern Ireland, and, you know, Boris Johnson said there will not be a border in the Irish Sea. It just wasn't true, was it?
But it wasn't true, and I think he genuinely thought, you know, things could move on and get changed once it happened. Same with the actual withdrawal agreement, because the withdrawal agreement, you know, as probably many of us pointed out at the time, wasn't really allowing us to completely take back control. I mean, state aid, all sorts of things that we've been left.
And, you know, we were told it was an oven-ready deal, and now we learn the oven wasn't even preheated. I mean, that's the truth of it. But, you know, we had Brexhaustion in this country.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, we'd reached that point, and I think, you know, the Brexit Party's success in May showed you we were desperate for some kind of solution. I think, to me, Kate, the biggest disappointment of all, and we can talk about the economy, you know, it's cost us 4% per annum, and yet actually until this year, our growth had been higher than the rest of the G7. And we can talk about borders and all the disappointments there, but to me the biggest disappointment is this. Those people in that square with us 3 years ago actually thought Brexit would usher in a new kind of politics. It hasn't, has it? It
hasn't, and you know, I do genuinely think that the public now has caught on to the fact that there really isn't much difference between Labour and the Conservatives. And I think at the next general election they are going to find it increasingly difficult to actually motivate them to go out and vote. And so the turnout could be very, very low, unless some kind of new party. I mean, the Reform Party is doing very well in the polls. They're getting as polling as... But I think, you know, the Reform Party has to become almost you know, reforming the fact that we haven't left the EU properly and protecting and saving the Union, because the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, to me, is hugely important. And Brexit, to me, was about our governments taking back, genuinely taking back control and not blaming, the civil servants and who turned to the EU for every little bit of, you know, they wouldn't do anything without asking Brussels. And I wanted the end of that.
And our judges too. You know, they love the ECHR, which makes it impossible to deport people.
Well, we have to leave the ECHR. And I just cannot understand any politician who thinks, you know, it's only the European court anyway, and there's a whole world. So all our human rights issues, that I just think people have caught onto that, because the whole question of immigration and the boats coming across and us being powerless is just unbelievable that we're so powerless.
Well, if the Conservatives aren't going to fight for these things and we get a Labour government, who edge us ever closer back to the single market. I think you're right.
But that's why they like the Northern Ireland Protocol, because it's a halfway house for them. And I'm afraid I wouldn't trust Keir Starmer, having watched him all those years. I wouldn't trust him.
So there's a lot more work to be done.
Yes, and I hope that the people are... See, I don't think people... they pretend that all these people who voted Brexit are feeling that they shouldn't have. I don't think that's true. I really think that people who voted Brexit are just so angry and disappointed almost and emotionally upset that we haven't actually achieved it. That's not their fault. That's not the public's fault. That's politicians and government fault.
So the political revolution needs to continue.
Well, who's going to lead it, Nigel?
Well, I don't know, but you're clearly up for the fight, Kate. You're clearly up for the fight.
We can't sit back and allow what was such an amazing thing to happen when we turned against all those people in the establishment who said we could never win. We can't allow that to be whittled away, drip by drip.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Strong words. In a moment, we'll talk about the International Monetary Fund. Yes, that. Well, they are really the high priests of globalism. They're predicting doom and gloom for the UK economy. Funny thing is, even though they announced it on this third anniversary of Brexit, it's not Brexit we're talking about. It's tax, regulation, and something to do, I think, with Jeremy Hunt. We'll discuss all of that in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, have we made the most of Brexit? Your reactions coming in thick and fast. Phil said, we haven't had the chance to make the most of Brexit. Stu says, Hard to make the most out of something that offers a massive zero. I don't think Stu was ever in favour of it somehow. Paul says, God no, the Tories have betrayed us. And the Rejoinder Quislings still blame all our ills on Brexit. Yes, they do every single day. Mike says Brexit hasn't had a chance yet. The government were deflected by COVID and the war in Ukraine. Their incompetence hasn't helped either. Don't let the Remainers win. And finally, Graham, passionate Graham, who says, no, Nigel, and I portion blame on the Brexit Party for not contesting 317 seats and giving who never wanted Brexit to do all they can to create a Brexit in name with an early EU withdrawal. Graham, I would point out to you that if I hadn't formed the Brexit Party, Mrs May would have stayed leader for much, much longer. And I doubt there'd have been any Brexit at all, or at least we would have had a second referendum or goodness knows what. So we did get rid of Mrs May and we helped Boris get a massive majority. And yes, he has completely and utterly squandered it. Now, the International Monetary Fund are not particularly our friends. They are the high priests of globalism, massive supporters of the euro. They've often breached their charter in actually getting involved in euro bailouts. But overnight, some quite dramatic predictions for them that the UK is headed for a really miserable year. We won't just do worse than the other G7 economies, we'll do worse in terms of growth even than Russia. Well, joining me from Tufton Street in Westminster is Liam Halligan, GB News' economics editor. Liam, tell me what's happening in Westminster tonight. What event are you attending on this third anniversary of us leaving the European Union?
Well, here I am, Nigel, in the heart of Westminster in Tufton Street, very much think tank land. And what we're seeing here tonight on this third anniversary is a meeting of what's called the European Foundation, a research group set up in the early 90s at the start of this journey, really, out of the European Union by the Tory MP Bill Cash, somebody who's really got into the nitty-gritty, the detail of EU law over the years. And we're going to see a number of speeches from mainly conservative Brexiteers, people like John Redwood, people like Bill Cash himself. There's talk that Priti Patel's going to be showing up. It starts at 8 o'clock. They're going to be launching this pamphlet, Nigel, which is Completing Brexit, a Democratic Necessity. And I think a lot of people here tonight who will be gathering in the next few minutes, they're literally just arriving behind me. They'll be looking at those IMF estimates and saying, not on your Nelly.
Yeah, I mean, Liam, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, for all the talk from other think tanks about how much Brexit has cost us, actually, our GDP had been outperforming the rest of the G7. Why do you think the IMF are as pessimistic, as bearish about the UK economy for 2023?
Well, the IMF's got a long track. Where I used to work, by the way, I know how these forecasts are constructed. The IMF's got quite a long track record of underestimating EU growth. Before the Brexit referendum, which you'll remember well, Nigel, in June 2016, the IMF said that just voting to leave the European Union would lead to a severe downturn in the economy. Her Majesty's Treasury said the same thing, of course, which then Chancellor George Osborne cited as fact. None of it happened. The UK economy actually sailed on quite happily throughout 2016 and 2017. And since that Brexit vote, of course, while we argued about Brexit for 3 years and then there was a transition period, and then pretty much when that ended, we went into COVID lockdown. And since then, of course, we've had war in Ukraine. But since that Brexit vote, the UK's grown actually pretty much the same as Germany. And last year, 2022, the UK actually outperformed most other G7 nations, including the Eurozone. We grew by 4.1%, partly because we had a deeper lockdown, and so we had a bit more of a bounce back. But look, forecasts aren't destiny, and the IMF also said in their report today, barely picked up by the media, that the UK did grow strongly last year, and the reason it isn't growing strongly this year is partly because we've been raising taxes when most other countries are lowering taxes, and also because we've had lots of strike action in the UK, of course, and because a lot of our workforce remains pretty shy after lockdown. We still have a high proportion of the UK workforce that hasn't quite returned to work since lockdown ended. And of course, there's lots of working from home going on, which many economists would say impacts productivity. I'm not nearly as pessimistic about the UK economy as the IMF is, and I don't think actually the Bank of England is either. A few months ago, the Bank of England said that the UK would endure a year-long recession, literally, in 2023. I think we're going to hear on Thursday, Nigel, that the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey will be rowing back from those very, very pessimistic assumptions about UK growth, and I think pretty soon the IMF will be doing the same.
Well, that's good news. But, Liam, there is something, isn't there, in what the IMF say, and something in what you and I have been saying together for some time here, that a country in which corporate taxes are due to go up by 30%, a third increase in corporate taxes coming just a couple of months down the line, and a personal tax regime that is dragging millions into 40p tax. It's difficult for us to really fulfil our potential with a tax regime like that.
Well, you know, as soon as I've finished talking to you, Nigel, as you'd expect from me, as you would do, I'm going to go inside for a drink and start talking to some of the guests. And I'm sure a big topic of conversation among the guests here tonight at this European Foundation meeting, launching this pamphlet, Completing Brexit, a Democratic Necessity, will be this idea that corporation tax is going up in April. That's legislated for. It's nailed on. It's going up from 19% to 25%, even though the economy is slowing. And even though, in my view, and in the view of quite a lot of other economists, that will actually cost the Treasury money raising that tax, because for a lot of lockdown ravaged businesses it will be the last straw. I'm detecting, Nigel, certainly among government backbenchers, if not among government ministers yet, a bit of a move to try and put pressure on Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak to stop that rise in corporation tax that's going to happen in April. People are putting their head above the parapet. It will feel like a tax cut, Nigel, because it's nailed on the rise, but it won't actually cost the government any money, so it can be seen as prudent. And actually, as I say, it may actually end up raising revenue for the Treasury, because it will mean more businesses survive.
Yeah. Well, Liam Halligan, thank you for that. And I want you, please, to do two things. One, go in there and lobby hard, stir as much as you possibly can. And secondly, please give my regards to everybody, many of whom I stood alongside in that referendum campaign. Liam Halligan, thank you. Well, you can bet your life Liam will be in there lobbying like Billy-O. And quite right, too. We cannot have corporation tax. You know, the local laundrette pays corporation tax. We can't have it going up by a third on the 1st of April. That would be disastrous for business and for jobs. In a moment, we discuss how a government department took it pretty much upon itself to spy against journalists, individuals and politicians who dared question lockdown. How on earth did they get these powers? All of that in a couple of minutes.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, here is a story straight from the books, the pages of George Orwell. I kid you not. A department within the department within the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, during the COVID pandemic, engaged a branch of the army. Yes, 77 Brigade, whose job is non-lethal psychological warfare. That's what they do. And they engage these people to literally spy on politicians, journalists and members of the public who spoke out and questioned either the modelling that Professor Ferguson had put forward, the efficacy of lockdowns, the vaccine. Anybody that stood up strongly in question was spied upon. How has this happened? And I'm joined by Emma Webb, political commentator. Emma, this is an extraordinary story. I mean, I'd never heard of 77 Brigade, part of the British Army. Had you?
No, and I mean, the story in itself is horrifying. The 77th Brigade is its original purpose. It was set up to deal with hostile state actors and violent extremists abroad. And then when the pandemic came about, at least according to this whistleblower who spoke to the organisation Big Brother Watch, someone from within the 77th Brigade went to the Cabinet Office and said, look, we've got this capacity. We can help you to monitor misinformation and disinformation, in quotation marks, my quotation marks, here in the UK during the pandemic. And that's what they did. And so instead of monitoring what people might think, Russian or Chinese misinformation or disinformation online, what they've actually been doing is surveilling the British population, British citizens on Twitter, using army resources, taxpayer money to essentially monitor and document the views being shared online by journalists, the public, and most frighteningly, by elected representatives, people like David Davis.
And this being done outside of the normal intelligence services by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, run by a cabinet minister. I mean, that's the part that I find absolutely so completely astonishing. I have to say full marks to Big Brother Watch. I mean, they produced this report and it's very comprehensive. What's really interesting, since this story broke on Sunday, there are no denials from government.
No, and I think, so Big Brother Watch's report focused the media reporting is focused on this. Their report also contains a lot of other units within government that are also involved in similar sorts of things. But obviously, this story about the 77th Brigade is the most particularly heinous, and it's people like Peter Hitchens, my former boss Toby Young, journalists like Julia Hartley-Brewer and others who
David Davis, the MP,
and David Davis, who. And I think we have to also note that whilst the government spokesman has said that this hasn't, this was open source information, it was on Twitter, and this hasn't led to any actions. The government are trusted flaggers, so they have the ability to reach out to big tech and to suggest to big tech maybe they should look into this post or that post. And David Davis actually did have his speech in Parliament removed from YouTube.
Yeah, I quote from the report: working with platforms, which means Twitter, Facebook, whoever it may be, working with platforms to remove harmful content. So, as you say, we had people working directly under a government department, working with giant West Coast of American tech companies to effectively remove public statements made by either respected journalists or elected politicians.
And what's important to note as well, that this isn't misinformation and disinformation. These are views that were being expressed that were critical of the government. So actually what has really been going on here is that we've had people within the army, within this department, and let's face it, using quite rudimentary techniques of heavy on man hours going through social media and not using the sorts of sophisticated tools that they might have used. So at least maybe that's some kind of comfort to us. And then sending this information to the Cabinet Office and therefore informing the government of the views of the British public that are just simply critical of government policy and critical of the Conservative Party. So, I mean, that in itself is worrying. And I think Big Brother Watch are absolutely right to say that this poses a threat to democracy. This poses a threat to a free society, to the freedom of the press. This should not be happening in Britain. It should not be happening in any free democratic society. It's unacceptable.
No, I agree totally. And the most shocking thing of all, and thank you, the most shocking thing of all is since that story broke on Sunday, you haven't read about it in the newspapers. You haven't seen it on other TV channels or heard it on other radio stations. No, you know why? Because the government gave so much of our money to media organisations in the form of advertising. Remember, Can You Look Into His Eyes and all the rest of that stuff, that they actually too were pretty complicit in many, many cases in closing down free speech. It's something we're going to watch. Emma Webb, thank you for joining me. Now, on this third anniversary of us joining the European Union, who else would appear on LBC Radio than the former leader of the Liberal group in the European Parliament, total Euro fanatic, Guy Verhofstadt. Yes, my old friend from the European Parliament. This is a little clip of what he had to say.
It's really an attempt by Putin to restore, the old Soviet Union. The only difference is that the Communist Party is then replaced by his cronies. That is what he's trying to do. And a united Europe, certainly on defense matters, would make an enormous difference. I think maybe without Brexit, maybe there was no invasion. I don't know. I guess.
You what? Did I miss something? Yes, he said it. He said the Ukraine invasion was because of Brexit. Yes, he is a full, foaming at the mouth, ranting, dangerous maniac. It's because of people like him that I thought it was vital that we did leave the European Union. Mr. Verhofstadt, let me remind you of something. In 2014, a democratically elected leader of Ukraine was brought down in a coup by people in the squares of Kiev waving European Union flags. And this endless, relentless march to the east of the European Union and implicit that not far behind was NATO led to me giving a speech in 2014 in the European Parliament where I said, our actions will give Mr. Putin a casus belli, and I said there will be a war in Ukraine. They hated me for saying it then. They hate me even more for saying it now. They say because I said that, it means I support Putin. I don't. They, this organisation that was supposed to keep the peace, they have done more than anybody to provoke what I still believe is an unnecessary war. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be joined by an artist, member of the Parachute Regiment turned artist, and boy, he's very, very political, and he's got himself into trouble more than once. Paul McGowan joins me in a moment on Talking Pints.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight. 3 years on since Britain's glorious exit from the EU, why are the political establishment and activist mainstream media still on a deranged campaign to destroy our independence dream? Brexit heroes Sir John Redwood and Nigel Farage weigh in live. Plus, there'll be unfiltered opinion from US media superstar Megyn Kelly and Fleet Street legend Kelvin MacKenzie. That's Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, only on GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's that time of the day again. Yes, I'm pleased to say it is Talking Pints. Paul McGowan joins me. Paul, welcome.
Cheers, Nigel. Good to see you again.
The programme. Now, always keen to know on Talking Pints about people's journeys, how they go from one place to another. There you are. You're growing up in Thanet in East Kent. School, you don't particularly excel at.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Constant runaway.
Yeah, you didn't sort of quite make the course in school. No. Fine, not everyone does. And then you decide it's the Parachute Regiment for me. And somehow you go from being in the Parachute Regiment to deciding you want to be an artist. And I suspect there aren't that many paras who become artists. Tell me I'm wrong. What happened? How?
Well, the funny thing is,
when I left the army, I had no idea what I was going to do. No idea. And one of my friends said to me, Paul, why don't you come work with us up in fashion in London? So I said, OK, then, no problem. It's a job. Good. So I went up there and I sort of enjoyed it. But after about 5 years, I thought I didn't want to end up an older person in fashion with a long ponytail, which they all seem to have. And I weren't prepared to do that. So I thought, well, I always wanted an education, so let's go to university.
Did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you? So despite the fact that you'd not made the most of it in your teens...
No, I literally lost the plot when I was younger. But the army helped me get back on track and work in London, because I used to commute every day from Margate all the way to London, work, and commute all the way back.
Before HS1?
Yeah,
It was a long journey.
It was a long journey, but the trouble is, if you worked in Margate, you couldn't make any money. If you worked in London and spent that extra 5 hours a day commuting, you could earn good money, you know? So that was definitely what I was going to do. So I got to one point, I thought, what am I going to do in my life? I don't want to stay in fashion. What am I going to do? So I went to university. I went to Falmouth. I was really lucky. I got picked up when I was at Falmouth by an art dealer. And I worked through university. I went through Falmouth, then Loughborough, then Winchester, and then Bath Spa. So I was a student and a professional artist at the same time. So it's really weird, but I had no financial problems as a student because of it. So it was really lucky, really.
And why art?
I think I always wanted to do it from a child, but it's one of those things that you don't think, well, I'm not going to go for that. What's the odds of never being able to make it as a professional artist? And it just seemed to click. Well, I think it gave me so much confidence when I got picked up by a gallery really early. I thought, well, anything's possible. So we went from strength to strength.
And you were able to earn a living fairly quickly?
No, no.
It's not easy, is it?
It took a long time. Probably, I was well into my 30s before I could make a living out of making art. And I absolutely loved doing it because I could be as controversial as I wanted on paper. And back then, I had no platform, I had no voice, and you had your website, there was no social media. And then as social media come out, I ended up more and more political and speaking out. And more
well, we're going to come to that. But first, you got picked up by the Eden Project, which was a massive project down in Cornwall, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, still to this day, it, is a very, very big tourist site and a very attractive place. And you kind of got involved in that because you are an environmentalist, yeah?
Yeah, I'm an environmentalist, a lifelong one. I will always be an environmentalist, but I do not believe in CO2 climate change.
Oh, that must make you a rare beast, because nearly all environmentalists today... Because I feel I'm in a similar camp to you. I'm an environmentalist, but I'm questioning.
Yeah, I've always questioned it. I don't believe in anything when they say the science is settled. As soon as they say the science is settled, science is never settled. If the Victorians said that, we'd still be going around in steam trains.
Yeah.
It's really important to analyse these things. And there's so much money going into the climate industry. I think...
No, you never said.
Yeah, what the hell? Where is all that money going?
Billions.
Yeah, billions.
But the Eden Project, your art... kind of fitting into this theme of a lot of animals, a lot of species living on the edge.
Yeah, that's correct. So I loved my time there, but I was not the only person that did not believe in CO2 climate change there. Lots of people back then in the climate industry, well, it was environmentalism back then, loads of people didn't believe in it. And over the years, they've been weaned out of the industry. So people who worked in there for years, like look at David Bellamy, for example.
I remember.
Pushed out the door. And the BBC treated him terribly. Absolutely terribly.
In the end, the politics kind of takes over quite a bit, doesn't it? And we finish up in 2010 with a pretty dramatic incident that you're involved in. It is... your art is being displayed, and it is a pretty controversial piece of art, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was made to be controversial.
What were you trying to say in that picture?
I was just trying to... Well, you've got to remember that explosive devices were really... There was a lot in the news about them at the time. And if you're an artist, you cannot ignore what's actually going on. I'm a social documenter, so I document what's going on. So the whole bomb on the stepladder, I called it bad ladder. It was a bit tongue-in-cheek, really, and it wasn't so much about environmentalism. It was about the times we live in, and I was trying to reflect the instability of our time. But what happened was It'd been in the window for 3 days. It'd been in all over London. It'd been in magazines. It'd been on the cover of a book in France. It wasn't a new piece that I did. And on the day of the show, the day of the opening, it would have been great if it had happened 2 days before. On the day of the opening, they put 2 big police vans outside the gallery. They waited for a young girl to come in to open up the gallery. Then they decided to jump out with machine guns, fully armed, and make a big fuss over it. It was totally unexpected. And when the gallery rung me up, I thought they were winding me up. I didn't actually believe it. And then I went down to the gallery, then the BBC rung me up, because the police informed the BBC straight away. So then the BBC gave me an interview for about 40 minutes on the phone, which they printed none of it, not a single word of it. They wrote their own script. And on top of that, even later on in the afternoon, at 5 o'clock, they put out a bulletin saying there was a bomb in a London gallery. And by this time, they'd already understood that that was not the case. But they put it out anyway, and it absolutely wrecked the show because loads of people thought it was shut down.
So you were censored?
So it took, yeah, totally censored.
Your art was censored?
Yeah, always censored. But I've been censored a lot, Nigel. I mean, I'm now banned from platforms like Facebook because they decided, because I make memes and I make Brexit artwork, they decided that I'm on a list of dangerous people or organisations. And
now,
that's what they used to censor me.
Brexit was a passion for you?
Yeah, totally. I could never understand why we had to give Brussels so much money, then they gave us it back, our own money, then put a little EU flag on it, and then pretended they'd given it to us. And it was always the taxpayers' money.
And
it used to drive me insane.
Your art about the European Union doesn't depict the European Union in a particularly good light, does it?
No, well, it doesn't. Would you like to see it?
Yeah, I think you've got an example hiding down there of it.
I sent quite a lot of images to the Brexit Party, and this is one of them, and you made it into a speech for the EU, and you were sitting there laughing away as it was done. So I've had this made up for you today.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's the
thank you,
Nigel. The sort of Death Star project of the European Union.
Well,
we did leave. We did leave. In the end, we left, and it's 3 years ago today that we had the party. But maybe Brexit's not worked out quite as well as we would liked it to have done.
I just don't think that the Conservatives are putting much effort into it.
No, well, I'm not sure whether they really believed in it fully.
No.
Now, Paul, one of the most difficult things for you is you finished up, as an artist with a quite serious disability with your right hand.
Yeah, well, what happened was I was put in I think it's called an ANPR list, and it's basically where when you drive anywhere, your number plate gets registered and the police swoop upon you. And I'll be honest, the majority of the police were lovely. They were absolutely fine, they're perfectly polite, but every now and then you'll bump into somebody that's not so nice. And I'd already had a bad hand. I'd already had an accident, fell on it 3 weeks before. And they decided, I told him, be careful of my hand, be careful of my hand. He decided to suddenly violently handcuff me. And he only single locked the cuffs. So every time it moved, it got tighter and tighter and tighter, and I just felt my whole hand just go crush down like that. So I'm in the police car, and I've got a broken hand. And rather amazingly, by the time we got back to the police station, all of their body cams had malfunctioned, apparently, and all the CCTV outside it's outside a fire station on a roundabout. They stopped me. It's covered with CCTV. All that malfunctions as well. And then it became a case of my word against the police's word. And because I had 21 stop and searches, including my house being searched, in just over 4 years, loads of arrests, because if they want to arrest you, they can just make up anything. Never any charges, got no criminal record. And it got to the point where I didn't know what to do. So I wrote a letter to Labour, a letter to Liberal Democrats, and a letter to the Conservatives. Labour rung me up really keen, sent me a race and diversity form, which I replied, never heard from ever again. Liberal Democrats never even contacted me.
And your battle is still going on, yeah?
Yeah. But Michelle Doneland, she rung me up in person, and she said, come up to Portcullis House and meet me and bring all your stuff. So I took it up there, and I don't know what she did, but that stopped immediately.
Well, that's one good thing.
Yeah.
But since then, you've moved on to memes and various other things, and I think you're going to go on making a nuisance of yourself.
I am.
For many, many years to come. You are clearly the artist they want to cancel.
I enjoy it.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. I've got a few seconds left on this show. It's Farage the Farage. What have you sent me today? Mick asks me, how can Brexit be the cause of our economic woes when this government haven't even implemented it? Well, Mick, the argument is that trade with the European Union is more difficult than it was as members. And there is some truth in that, particularly through non-tariff barriers and general silly nonsense that once or twice the French have tried to put upon us, and in particular, of course, on Northern Ireland. But the point is that when you move house, there are downside costs to moving a house, but upside benefits to doing it. What the Tories haven't done is to put in place getting rid of thousands of ridiculous EU laws. They say they're doing it now, but it's nearly 7 years since we voted. Mary asks, how many more billions will it take to improve the performance of the NHS to get it above abysmal? Mary, I think we're at a point where this is about far more than money. It's about how the money is spent. We're spending 12% of our GDP on health. Just a few short years ago, literally a handful of years ago, we were spending 8%. So 50% more money, but the return is not commensurate with it. We need to have a complete rethink about whether this system is working or not. And I've got to tell you, it isn't working. Somebody needs the courage to stand up and say, this was a 1940s model, it needs a proper, full rethink. I'm done for today, but back with you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. But right now, I'm going to put you in the very capable hands of Mark Dolan.
Nigel, thanks for another cracking show, and we will continue the Brexit conversation. We will be celebrating the 3-year anniversary, and yes, I said celebrate. That's the topic of my Big Opinion monologue. But can Labour be trusted with Brexit? We'll discuss that next. Here's the weather.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGowan. It's turning increasingly windy in the north, and in the far north, the risk of gales during the next 24 hours before later Wednesday, the wind and a lot of the showers ease away. What we're seeing at the moment is a north-south contrast with high pressure closer to the south. It's mainly dry. A cold front has cleared the cloud, but further north, tightly packed isobars, strong wind, blustery showers continuing across Scotland, Northern Ireland into northern England during the night. And those showers falling as snow over the hills and mountains of Scotland. But we've also got the gale force wind peaking around the early hours of Wednesday. 60, 70, perhaps 80 mile per hour wind gusts for exposed coasts of northern Scotland could cause disruption. It's a cold night in the north, 3 or 4 Celsius. Below that, over hills, but further south, 5 to 7 Celsius. Enough of a wind to prevent a widespread frost. And actually a bright start to the south first thing. That's where the best of the sunshine will be, I think, through Wednesday. Areas of cloud filtering through Northern Ireland into south and west Scotland, as well as northern England, bringing some steady rain for a time, whilst things brighten up in the northeast of Scotland. The wind and the showers easing here. A little less cold in the north on Wednesday, 7 or 8 Celsius. Further south, not quite as mild as Tuesday, 10 or 11 Celsius. But a cloudy end to the day for most. Now we've got this next weather system moving through, bringing some steady rain across Northern Ireland, Scotland, Northern England on Wednesday night. That will keep things frost-free, but it is a damp start to Thursday. In the northwest of Scotland. Further south, clear spells overnight, but it will be a generally cloudy picture for Wales and the southwest. Again, keeping things frost-free, but I think greyer skies across the board on Thursday compared with the last couple of days and into Wednesday. Now for northern Scotland, further steady rain, heaviest over northwest Highlands, and that rain's going to continue through much of Thursday as well as into Friday. But for the rest of the UK, for many places, it is mostly dry and it's warming up.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very